A Year with God, Day 24. Today the reading was out of Colossians chapter 1, and it was about Jesus Christ. And I want to read a bit of it in a minute. The commentary had focused on Christ being Lord over all creation, reconciler between man and God. And the thing that stood out to me the most today was actually in my reading from Colossians 1, starting in verse 15. It says, He, Christ, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in Him all things in heaven and on earth are created, things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or powers. All things have been created through Him and for Him. He Himself is before all things, and in Him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that He might have first place in everything. For in Him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through Him God was pleased to reconcile to Himself all things. The thing that stood out to me as I read through this passage was the emphasis on the preeminence of Christ. Particularly talking about in Him all things hold together, all things exist by Him. And the one thing that, kind of the two things, they kind of go together. Talking about Christ being the image of the invisible God. The God who we can't see, we couldn't see before. In Christ, we could. We can identify with Christ because of His humanity, because God dwelt bodily within Him. And that was the second phrase, for in Him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. And I just find that thought very compelling, very inspiring, that God Himself dwelt fully in Christ. God Himself in Christ came down to earth, the ultimate expression of God with man. Jesus' very name being Emmanuel, God with us. There is a personal connection in that to me. One that, for me, makes it easier to relate to God through Christ. Because Christ dwelt, or God dwelt in Christ fully, there's nothing I go through that God hasn't seen. And not just seen from afar, not just seen as creator, but seen personally, walking through it the same way I do. Because God Himself dwelt in Christ. Christ who had the same life on earth, the same experiences, the same feelings. There's something about that thought that, to me, brings God much, much closer. So, those are my thoughts on day 24.